I want to go over several things that will help you with your childhood story. And if you'll follow with me, starting with homework 613 on page 339, I want to go over some key vocabulary that you probably will want to use. Okay, the first one at the top of page 339 is this. This means a long time ago or sometime in the past. So you might say, back when I was a really little kid. Um, let's see. Notice that, again, I want to emphasize transitions are done with eyebrows raised. So if you look at the transition the following day, she signs next day. Okay, what else? This can mean wrong, but remember it can mean like, oh shoot, suddenly, and then suddenly. Okay, so it's usually something usually negative, but not necessarily. It can be once in a while. I saw a friend, see, long time, see none. But generally, this is like, oops, yikes, something bad happened, or you heard, like, heard mom, or okay, I think you get the idea. You might want to cry, maybe, talking about childhood stories. Um, and this use of the sign wrong with the brows furrowed is asking what's wrong, like what's the matter. Maybe one of your parents in your story or some adult asks you, what's wrong? What's the matter? Let's see. Notice on page 340, on the second row of photos, transition now. Now, you may want to use that at the end of your story for your conclusion. Like, for example, Michelle says, now I understand. Or maybe she says, yeah, she said, actually, the very next picture is realize or understand. Now I understand. Okay, moving along. Let's see. Page 343, sorry is a very common sign. Um, Again, that transition, sudden, unexpected change. If you look at page 344, it shows transitions also. And remember, transitions aren't transitions without eyebrows raised. So you could sign, that kind of means like one day I was five. One day I was five. But if you sign it with eyebrows raised, that means one day when I was five makes all the difference, those raised eyebrows. Okay, moving along. Homework 614. Let me see what else could be a very common sign. Happy, mad, or upset, grouchy. Um, Again, page 348 shows transitions. And again, those transitions require raised eyebrows. Okay, homework 615. Now, this one talks about the difference between transitions and modified verbs. You want to modify a verb in a story to move the story along. A lot of times, let's say you might, in actual time, you might have been doing something for a minute or 2 minutes. But obviously, you can't just sign that for a whole minute or two because then we're just like waiting. So, for example, if you look at number two, laughing, um, wait, how does she do it? Oh, okay. So she's covering her mouth and she's laughing and pointing and laughing. Ha ha ha. CHAHA, that's ha ha ha. Now she might have done that for 10 or 15 seconds, but in this you're not going to do it that long. So it's just, and that's enough. Um, Also, just to clarify the difference between transitions and modified verbs, number one, when she signs, that's a transition, which means kind of like, and then, and after that was done. Um, Number three is the sign for tomorrow, which can also, if you're talking about the past, it can mean the next day. So this is tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and the day after that. Or since we're talking about the past, it would be like saying the next day, the day after that, and then she signs. This means as moves along, time went by. A few days later is kind of what she's saying there. Okay, now number four, that's also a modified verb because he might have spent 10 or 15 seconds looking, but we really don't want to see you doing that for 15 seconds. So it's just, and that's enough. Okay, number five, that's a transition, which means I thought of something and then I had an idea. Notice that this is the word, you might not know this, but this is the sign for think. Think. But when you sign I think, like I'm not sure, but I think so, you tilt the head to the side and you squint your eyes, I think, and sometimes you grimace or pull your teeth, your bare your teeth. Okay? That's I think, as in I'm not sure, but I think maybe. But this is a thought occurred to me. It's really the same sign, but instead of this, it's the sign is moved, the motion of it is different, the movement, I should say, is different, and also the facial expression is very different. Okay. Um, okay, I'm going to skip past some of this. Um, okay, I'm actually going to skip through 616 for now. Now look at homework 617. Very important, as always, that you read every word in the book because it's all spelled out for you very clearly if you read it. But I'm going to talk you through it. Okay, so it says the story should be about 3 to 4 minutes long. So that's important right there, 3 to 4 minutes long. The story should not center on a sound, a play on words, or the meaning of a particular word. So it's not like this story is going to be about the meaning of the word maybe, or the sound woof, or um, the um, the sound of boiling water. It's not about sound or play on words because this is a visual story and we don't want to rely on the hearing experience, the hearing as in hearing person experience. Okay, third bullet point, there should be no more than three characters in the story. If you start to have a lot of different people, it becomes very confusing. But you should have two or three people in your story because you want it to be more than just about yourself. So there probably should be three people in your story. or at least two, somebody other than just you, right? There should be at least two people in the story. Um, Choose an incident that can be communicated using what we have learned in class. Okay? Don't look up a whole bunch of words because you don't know the signs for them. Because what happens is you look up words, you get the wrong sign, you get a sign that's not really the sign for that word, but a sign for another word that sounds like it. Or, I'm sorry to say, but maybe you learn the sign wrong because you didn't learn it in class and you're just learning it from a little video and you don't sign it correctly. And then when you tell your story, I don't understand your story because you signed it wrong. So use the signs that we've learned in class. If you maybe need one sign, that's okay. If you do have any questions about signs, please ask me. Okay, the last bullet point is the story must be told in the first person. First person is I or me. I, that's the first person. Second person is you. Third person is he, she, it, they. Second person is also plural, like you all. First person can be plural, we, all of us, them, all of them, okay? But anyway, first person is my story. I'm going to tell you about me, my story, what happened to me. I saw, I ran, I cried, okay? All right. And then notice at the bottom of page 360, there's this sort of shaded rectangle, and that's the narrative structure. And you need to follow that narrative structure in telling your story. So notice that you have to have three main parts of the story: the background, the body, and the conclusion. Within the background, you have three things. You begin with an opening phrase. An opening phrase could be, it could be long time ago, I was very little, when I was very little, 3 years old, or four or five, or long time ago, my family, every summer, we went to visit grandma and grandpa. Or I'm trying to remember if you've learned every year. Every year, I think you have. Every year summer. So again, a long time ago, my family, a long time ago, every summer, my family used to visit grandma and grandpa at their house by the lake. Okay, just an example. And that involves giving the relevant background. So long time ago could be an opening phrase, and then the relevant background is who, it's my family, when is every year summer, where is grandma, grandpa, their house near lake, and what happened before the the actual incident that happened. Okay, then body. Begin with a transition. A transition could be one day, or it could be my birthday. It could be some transition that tells us about a specific time when this happens. You gave us a general time, like we used to go every summer, but now a specific day or a time. And then use role shift. Notice it says at least 3 turns in the exchange. What that means is that you need to have some dialogue in your story. You need to be talking with somebody. So you should turn, this is this is me, right? I'm turning to talk with this other person. If that person is an adult and they're taller, then I'm turning and I'm looking up. And then for me to play them, I turn this way and look down. Okay, or it could be a sibling or a friend, and I'm turning this way and I'm looking level, and that person's turning back at me and they're looking level. So there's this turn taking like this. My feet right now are planted on the ground. They're not moving at all. I'm just moving my upper body. Okay, integrate feelings and reactions. So it could be or, 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 can't wait, or crying. Okay, so those are feelings and reactions, or it could be any expression of emotion. Use the object action word order. So, in ASL we have the noun and then the verb, or in other words, object and then action. So, for example, to throw a ball would be ball throw, or to chop wood would be wood chop. So wood, you may not have learned this sign. Wood, boom, 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 or saw, wood. Okay. Um, use transitions and modified verbs to move the story along. I already talked about that. Conclusion, begin with a transition. So the transition could be now, or um, since. Okay, that could be one, since. Comment on what you learned or what has happened since. So, now I understand, or now I know, now I see, now I always whatever, or now I never, or um, since then I not go lake again. I have not been back to the lake. Okay, page 361. Rehearse the story until you are completely comfortable. Now, your rehearsal video is due tonight, if I'm not mistaken, Wednesday. So since I basically told you about this childhood story 2 or 3 weeks ago, you should have been rehearsing all this time. But definitely by now, you should be rehearsing practice, practice, practice until you're comfortable. If by some chance you're not comfortable tonight, that's okay. Just record your whole story, even if it's not perfect, and submit it, and that shows me that you have been trying, that you've been practicing. Okay, but this rehearsal that you're doing tonight should not be the first time that you've ever rehearsed this story. It should not be the first time you've ever told this story. You should have been practicing at least this week. So what I see tonight should be maybe your third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh time telling the story. Not perfect yet, that's okay, but definitely it shouldn't just be like your first time trying it out. Okay, memorize the opening. It helps you get over the nervousness at the beginning. Again, I'm at the top of page 361. Memorize the conclusion. Okay, telling your story. It says tell your story in a sitting position. I'm standing, but I have a lot of practice signing without moving my feet when I'm standing. A lot of times beginner signers, they move their feet when they're doing roll shifting. Okay. If you can stand and plant your feet on the ground and just move your upper body, more power to you. If you need to sit in order to stay where you are and only move the upper body, then by all means sit. Articulate your client. It would be nice if I could articulate my words clearly and correctly. Articulate your signs clearly and correctly. Move only your head, eyes, and shoulder when roll shifting, not your whole body. Also, if you have one of those swiveling chairs, do not be swiveling in your chair when you're doing the roll shift. All you have to do is move your upper body. Keep your butt in place. Don't move your butt. Pace your story and engage your listeners. In other words, don't be too slow, don't be too rushed, and keep looking at the camera once in a while, like you're looking at your audience. You're with me, you're following, you're engaging your audience. It says make eye contact with everyone in the group. Well, you're not telling a story to a group in a classroom, but just make contact with that camera once in a while to keep us involved. Um, do not end your story with an announcement that you are done. So that's not the end of the story. You should end the story by saying your thing and then lowering your hands and maybe a little nod at the end, and that's it. Okay, your audience should know that you are done by the way you wind down the story and bring it to a close. And if you need practice with that, just watch all the stories that you've been assigned to watch the last 2 weeks. Okay, grading criteria. Your grade will be based on how well you follow the narrative structure, incorporate the essential language elements, which would include signs and grammar, eyebrows raised for transitions and yes, no questions, lowered for WH word questions, excuse me. Formed your signs correctly and used a good range of vocabulary. You've learned a lot of vocabulary, so I'd like to see you use a good amount of the vocabulary that you've learned in class. Use appropriate amount of details and that made sense. Your story needs to make sense. For me to understand it, to appreciate it, to grade it, I need to understand what you're trying to say. And it should have enough detail to make it interesting, but not so much detail that it's boring. So, try to find a happy medium there. That you were able to get the meaning across and that you engaged the audience. You'll be graded on all of those things. Um, Now, remember how it said language elements? It said incorporated the essential language elements. Well, you can see on page 362 that it actually talks about language elements right there. Um, Language elements is the top header, but then notice there are italicized headers below that. So that means role shift is a language element. If you look at page 363, word order is a language element. Modified verbs is a language element. Page 365, transitions is a language element. Okay, so, and really, folks, I think this is a great book. And I think if you look at every picture and you read every word, you will do well. And if you have questions about what you carefully look at and read, then ask me and I can help answer. You also have here, starting on page 367, you have sign tips. And page 368, strategies to get the meaning across. You have strategy, describe the concept. Notice that on page 368, there's this sign. That means and Cindy uses that sign to introduce the sign for ghost. And watch the signs that she uses. She says something like, and also notice page 369, strategy to introduce a key sign. It talks about how Melinda introduced the concept of a rooster. And I think, if I remember correctly, she says something like, okay, she's signing girl, sign chicken, boy, sign rooster, or male, sign rooster. You can watch what Cindy does to see exactly how she does it. Let's see. Parts of the house, page 370. You don't have to describe your whole house, please, but it just gives you an idea of how to lay things out. Okay, one last tidbit that I want to suggest to you is don't fingerspell. There's really no need to fingerspell. It will stop your momentum in its tracks. It will slow everything down. If you spell it incorrectly or unclearly, it will just add to the confusion rather than clarifying anything. And we probably don't need to know whatever it is you're fingerspelling. Like a lot of times, for some reason, students like to say, my cat, Bunny, or my best friend, Samantha. We don't need to know Samantha. You can say my best friend, or my sister, my older sister, my younger sister, this one. You could say, so we know who they are, but don't spell the names of your sisters. Don't spell the name of a pet. Um, if you don't know the sign for something, don't fingerspell it. If you don't know the sign, then that means nobody else in class knows the sign either, which means that they won't understand your story. And fingerspelling it just doesn't really help the flow of the story. So if you need a sign for a word, let me know, please, and I can help you. I can give you the sign for that. Or maybe you can avoid signing that. Maybe you don't have to say something like um, activity. If you're talking about different things that you did for fun, I enjoy swimming, running, bike riding. You don't ever actually have to say the word activity. You could just say, I like, and then list those three activities. So you don't need a sign for activity, if you know what I'm saying. Okay, so I hope that helps, and I hope I didn't bore you to tears. 27 minutes, almost 28. I really did this to help guys.